I unmute you. Go ahead and talk and see if that works. Dan, go ahead and talk and see if that works, if we can hear you in the room. Dan Peterson. Is he not hearing? On the
Small technical difficulties we're working through.
well,
here.
this is unmuted. Do we unmute? It's unmuted here already. Dan, can you hear us?
Hey, Dan, am I coming through?
Here you go. There you go.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're coming through now.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Hi, Dan.
So
Welcome.
thank you. I saw the pledge going down, but missed it. So I did my part here silently. But don't know the context of what the tee up was. Are we ready for
Yeah,
me to go ahead?
we are ready. We are ready for you and have done very little intro, and so the stage is yours.
All right. Well, instead of putting my pretty face on there, I'm going to try to go one more. Do you have a screen access there that I can share my screen? Are you seeing a screen right now?
We're seeing a screen, Dan, but just give us 1 second because the speaker's dropping in and out for some
Okay.
reason.
Okay.
Hold on. 'Cause
Now
we
he's
can
back.
hear you now, but
Okay.
okay. Get the screen up.
Go to plan B.
There we go. Dan, we see you.
All right. And do you see the Headwaters Technology Park website?
do.
There we go.
Yes. We
Okay.
do. Yes, we do.
Excellent.
That.
Well then, I guess without further ado, I'm going to go in what I'd like to cover on this quick update, short agenda, and leave enough time, hopefully, if there's questions that we want to address, that we have enough time for that as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So what I wanted to do this evening is, and by the way, good afternoon and good evening, wherever we feel we're at 5:30. I just want to talk briefly about specific site activity, and then make some comments on general market activity. And again, leave plenty of room for questions at the end. As you may recall, earlier this year, we were engaged with a developer for a potential 1.3 million square foot distribution center project. However, when the end user began to focus on another site with a different developer in May, the developer we were working with let their letter of intent on our site expire. Now, as part of that qualification process and working with that developer, we met with Met Council and some others to determine a process for, in this set of conditions that was necessary for the project, relocating an interceptor line that runs, if I can see my mouse, basically running through the middle of our site here. And because of the way the footprint was designed for that particular project, it was a necessary component. Long story short, as I say, when the letter of intent expired and the user started to look elsewhere, we had laid out a plan and a process with Met Council and others for how that would go about if we did in fact want to relocate that line. Now, recently, the developer has come back to us with another project. It's a similar large warehouse distribution center project. But it was just a conversation as a check-in with me about a week and a half ago. So it's very early stage, but with the point I want to make about it, why I think it's great as far as what our potential can be here is that during our other process with the other user and the same developer, the city's demonstration to expedite schedules and the process we planned out, if in fact we needed to address those site conditions like moving that interceptor, leaves us in a great position to be working with this group and qualify their interest in an expedited and efficient manner, if in fact that project moves ahead. We'll probably know more here in the coming weeks if there's going to be some traction there. But again, I think it was comments that were shared with me after we didn't officially lose, but were taken off the focus of that last distribution center, that the group and their investment partners from another state were very impressed with the speed and professionalism that the city had shown in preparing to react through the entitling and planning process, as well as the ability to be proactive in setting up the meetings with Met Council, et cetera. It was all very, left a really good taste in their mouth as far as being able to come back and try to do something again in the future. Part of our call it lessons learned and kind of Monday morning quarterbacking after the letter of intent was expired and that project looked to be heading elsewhere. We had some internal discussions with staff about putting together some conceptual sites or master plans that would show a subdivided or industrial uses, put together on this site for conversational and marketing purposes. This was due in part to certainly the site conditions and the lessons we learned there, but also a bit of the market conditions of seeing more industrial deals looking in the 40, 50 type of acreage, not the 123 total sum that we were seeing, that we have at this site. So what was concluded, I think, in that discussion and what's proven out since is that we could investigate other developer interests that might also help us craft some of those conceptual plans for this site. In other words, they're already working with some of the end users. And so if they come to it and envision how we subdivide this site for 2 or 3 larger projects versus one large, enormous project, it might be more specific to what their need is and then help gain some traction in selling adjacent parcels within a subdivided larger parcel like this. This effort is ongoing, and now another developer that we have been working with in the past on other projects has come to us and has included our site in their submission for a build-to-suit project, an industrial build-to-suit project. And should this become their primary site and they secure a stronger leaning with this build-to-suit user, then we will see that conceptual site plan development process start to begin. Again, it's very recent, but I think it's also indicative of what we've been seeing certainly in the industrial market in the last year or so. Now, on the data center front, because this is a technology park, we've been marketing this nationally. The data center market continues to be very strong. I mean, demand has tripled year over year, as has the new supply under construction in the primary and secondary markets. But like many places in many ways, a lot of these markets are experiencing delays in new deliveries and continued supply chain disruptions. And costs for building materials are part of that cause. Long lead times for electrical infrastructure is causing larger projects to look for sites with more immediate power. And this, again, I think is a bit of our opportunity because of the power constraints nationwide. Data center projects are starting to make location decisions based simply on immediately available power capacities of size. Now, these are in the 10 to 20 megawatt range. And our site currently is not provisioned to that level, but I am working with Conexus to better understand our timelines for power delivery of that size to our site. This updated information, like a conceptual site plan, it would give us predictable delivery timelines. That's going to help keep our site under consideration for some of these projects that we know are looking now, and potentially climb up the list of national site selection site selectors looking for these types of location opportunities. So, you know, the power and supply constraints combined with the endless hyperscale data center needs are making conditions competitive everywhere. The crypto mining development has died down for the time being and foreseeable future, but now more established companies are aggressively moving on sites to either land bank or actually develop where user needs are projected. I know we say this a lot in the data center business for this part of the country, but it does seem to be cresting in secondary and tertiary markets where it's rising up. And whether or not there's going to be a third-party service provider or a hyperscaler like cloud service provider being able to develop in a timely fashion will be contingent on some of these things that we're talking about. They buy in quantity for a lot of their actual equipment because they buy at such scale, but it's that power delivery from the utility that will be a critical part of them being able to execute at a site. So we're actively investigating that with, as I said, with Conexus on the data center front. We have in the last 12 months submitted our site to, I'll call it a half a dozen hyperscale projects nationally that have been looking. So these two categories, the industrial and the data center market, are still where we've seen activity and focus on an effort to obviously realize the highest price per foot, but also a conducive project for the city and the surrounding area. I'm going to pop over here, and if you can see this slide, this is actually just all the land sales in the last year that have happened 10 acres and above in the Northwest and Northeast market. And you'll see a lot of Northwest market activity. And you see over here in the Northeast. It's a long list. It includes a varied range of types of uses. It's got residential in there, so home developers that have gotten large parcels. It's commercial, it's industrial, it's retail, but there's not too many retail, sites over 10 acres. But what it shows us too is that, here in the Northwest and Northeast market are the top dozen or so by acreage land sales in the last year. And while your top ones we're at 123, and here you have 258, 183. The ones on the top are more on the mixed use, master planning, some residential, some commercial type of uses. But as you go down and you look at those 70, 60, 50 acreage parcels, and especially the industrial ones, you start to see the average price per acre start to trend up. So as a whole, you take out the highs and lows of that sampling, and you're still, a little under $1 a foot from a land price perspective, which to us is a healthy price at these larger scales. Now, again, industrial has been very robust, and data center, for its unique characteristics, also continues to be robust. And when you look at some specific comps, considering that, and these are some from the larger sampling of the market, you can see that certain industrial projects, even at close to 60 acres here, goes for close to $400,000 an acre. The new data center data bank development at 14 and a half acres, a pad ready site, 333,000 per acre. So there are extremes, and the land game is such that, every land is different, every location is different, but we look to some of these characteristics to see the support level for these user groups and what they're doing. I kind of shelled out a lot there without giving either myself a chance to breathe or others to chime in, but maybe I stop there for a second and see if there's any immediate questions that the committee might have.
Any immediate questions for Dan based on what he's presented so far? I guess, Dan, fit this in wherever it makes sense. I mean, ultimately, it's always good to know, kind of, would you have any, short of the path that perhaps is being considered now with continued conversations with the Met Council and potential for moving that sewer line, which is a very tactical move, but perhaps important for that parcel. Are there other things you would recommend that we do different, or shifts that we take either strategy or tactically to in your recommendation?
Aside from what we had mentioned about some conceptual site plans, that then also starts to address any potential user hurdles down the road, like truck traffic on Fenway, I think was one that, to the degree that we have the most current traffic studies for the use for the site, I think is always a positive. Moving the interceptor is not a given. This was just a 1.5 million square feet that really was a giant rectangle that wanted to go on top of it. So, to the degree that this develops as 3, 4, 5 buildings, there's a real strong potential of working around that. I think it was graded by the Met Council as one that probably was going to need some attention in the not too distant future. However, if it's not broke, let's not fix it, I guess is my mindset. But, as formal recommendations, other than that, I see more than you folks do on the activity. And I do feel that the way that we've gone about it, we gave somebody essentially the degree of comfort for the look that we did with the letter of intent with inland development. And that was, I think, a good way to try to qualify and capture that interest. I think it sent the right message to the developer. I don't think it compromised us in market availability, because the reality was we had the ability to receive more interest. We didn't investigate or proactively investigated it during that time. But all of these lead times for and where we've been in the market, I don't think has hampered any of our efforts. So I don't know that I would have any more specific recommendations at this time.
Very good. And then just overall volume of, levels of interest. It's great to hear your assessment on just where we are today on levels of interest, but step us back maybe where we were a year ago or 18 months and do a comparison. We've always had a level of interest in kind of traffic pattern related to this property. Are you seeing that picking up, or are you seeing that staying about kind of, are we at about the same level of just overall, however you're quantifying that overall market interest level?
I don't know that I think it's just been more as people get into the site itself and start to understand its proximity to other things and how they'll use the site. I think it's been mostly site specific. It hasn't really been market driven as far as, but you have a large parcel that, if you're going to bring a bunch of trucks in and out of, you want to be looking at how we do that efficiently for the user, but also conducive to the surrounding neighborhood. And that's whether or not we want to make sure that we have any of the conditions that the city wants to ensure they see in a development a part of our front end in our discussions with those users. So in other words, if they're going to be able to have a truck court on the west side, or if they're going to have a turnoff that, or not have a turnoff, those kinds of things, that as long as we're thinking through those and have crafted answers for that. I mean, we can't know everything that someone wants to do here, but that's another reason for us to hopefully co-create some concepts with some folks that are out there, either more closely working with those end users than we are.
Understood. Other questions or thoughts?
So I have a question. This, Dan, this might be more to staff. So this is good news. I guess unless I missed something, I wasn't aware that we had a user as much as wanting 1 million square feet that's interested in into this site. So that's good news. But as the city kind of backed off a little bit, and it seemed like our main focus was to be a data center. That was the first and foremost, correct? And now it's somewhat seems like we're walking that back a little bit, which I'm not saying is good or bad, but it just kind of seems like new information.
I think to the point where we started out data center is absolutely correct. When we looked at this, started to market this, that was sort of the hot market segment at the time. It still fits the criteria needed for a data center in terms of redundant power, fiber proximity, et cetera. But also as industrial has become more popular and kind of become sort of the darling of the market, we're making sure that we're marketing in that space as well and being responsive to those inquiries too. Because I think when we first listed this, we never set the listing of it's going to be data specific. We weren't going to do that at the expense of trying to get it into the industrial space. The overall goal is here to try to create a job center for the city. And I think both spaces fit that. So we're sort of, marketing in both segments at this point.
I would also say this parcel a couple of times now over the last, 3 to 5 years has been, has had some serious consideration. And so it was great when, the request came to council of, would we do a letter of intent, which provided an opportunity for a further evaluation and for us to go deeper into the process. And so it was exciting that we were given that opportunity. Unfortunately, we weren't selected, as Dan mentioned, and that kind of puts us back into the full market. And I've just, from sitting in this seat and sitting in council seats, I think that's just part of the process, that it's part of the due diligence and discovery process for the purchaser. And, we just, continue to keep it, keep marketing and keep it moving, because it's not sold until it's actually sold, and it's part of the process. So it's great. We've been finalists. We've just never got the final rose ring, whatever analogy we want to use.
And I think to that point,
have not got. We've been engaged a couple of times, have not gotten married yet. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great news. I get that. Seems like it might be somewhat new to the EDA, I guess. So that's great news. The other question for you, Dan, was you mentioned, and maybe that was why we were opted out on that last big user, but you mentioned some site condition issues. We've done numerous studies, Bolton and Mink have. What are those concerns, or was there something that came to the top that might be a challenge going forward?
Oh, yeah, no, when I referenced the site conditions, I mean, again, I think what was great was we had a group with their engineering firm, an independent party, the developer, their engineering firm, they were, working on this site to qualify it based on their needs and coming up with what were potential objections. And really the only concern was that interceptor pipe and that depth. And again, we had a very studied and measured answer for them on how to address that. And we had the parties at the table on how to rectify that if we needed. And we had an understood timeline that was, what it really did is again, this is a testament to the staff and to the city and to everybody that's been working on this, is that even with those conditions known, we were looking to deliver on a timeline so that project could be realized when the end user ultimately wanted, in spite of that exposed issue. I think all that has done is just made us smarter and more market prepared to deal with the others that come down the pipe. So, I don't see, again, when I reference something like, I think of specific parts of what our due diligence or their due diligence was on the site was to, understand how they would function in and around this site. Those just, bring up questions that we can't know until someone comes to us with those requests. So I don't see restrictions going forward from the characteristics of what we've discovered in that go-round. And I will emphasize for everyone that that project hasn't landed yet. They were focusing on another site and with another developer, and so we don't know ultimately where that is going. So, we may have been at least approaching the altar, but I'll never say never about not getting at least engaged in a more meaningful way, even on that one. But again, they're in the business of that. They've come back to us with another one. We're talking with another developer, as I mentioned, to get their ideas on concept down because they're pursuing a build to suit opportunity. And we have 4 hyperscalers and 2 enterprise on the data center front that, whether they want 20, 40, or all 123 of this site would probably give this group some serious reason to consider how we might subdivide once you start to look at maybe the price per acre or the revenue potential, as Dan mentioned, how that can mean for, and a job and revenue creator for the city.
Help me on scale. When you're referring to a data center and you're referencing a hyperscaler versus enterprise, is hyperscale larger than an enterprise provider, or?
It can be.
Is that a-
Hyperscale is more about kind of the magnitude, and then what we fall into is a lot of the cloud service providers that build their own, the Microsofts and Amazons of the world. I'm going to show you something here just briefly that, if I can find it. This is a good example of, this is about a 70-some acre site that right now there's a kind of a study going on, of impact study for their surrounding area. And you can see where this is divided into 450,000 square foot data centers. An industrial buffer area with the residential area. There's some other data centers already. So this is how someone looks at, carving up a site in a very rough fashion. And a hyperscaler could take down land bank, the entire site, and develop one of these. They could buy one and just develop it, and then you would see others potentially come in because the infrastructure is put in here. This is a substation that they can increase to 50 megawatts. There's a history of some traction with data centers in the area, which has helped because it puts more network in that area. But again, our characteristics of our site, we have a strong network story. We're figuring out really our delivery times for a higher level of true large capacity megawatts. So, this is a conceivable scenario down the road. I'm not saying tomorrow, but one group right now could have the appetite to do something like this, but they may only develop one component of it.
Understand. Under a plan like this, is this what you mean by, so a subdevelopment like that, or a parceled approach like that may mean that that interceptor line is just fine as is? Is that part of what you're seeing too?
Yep. Yeah, I'm saying that if, depending on how the site's developed, we, may not need to move that.
Yep, understood.
Dan, what's allowed on top of that pipe? Anything? I mean, a parking lot or anything like that?
You may be able to put a street or a parking lot, but Met Council is pretty fussy. They would rather have nothing on top of that.
So if
they
it's
just-
left, how big of an area would it have to be left, like a easement or whatever you
Well, I
want to
think
call it?
probably 20 feet on 20 foot to 50 foot. It's a 36-inch pipe, so
20
to
feet seems,
replace that,
seems narrow.
I don't know. They prefer to move it. I mean, it's a $2 million project.
Well, the point I'm trying to get at is that you still have to have some sort of an area
Right.
that's just for that pipe regardless, so you lose out some there too, so.
And we would hope that would be a street or maybe a parking lot, but definitely it cannot be a building.
When you say 2 million, would that be shared, or is that on the city?
Shared.
I've got a question. Does the city have a plan for getting trucks in and out of there other than Headwaters Parkway? Or is Headwaters Parkway going to be the main?
Well, I think there's a couple alternatives. Obviously Fenway to 97 is a big one, but we have residential concerns there. The other one would be Headwaters Parkway to 61. If you had a large truck traffic, you might have to look out going west, out to the interstate to the frontage roads, where that new gas station development is, so.
Point out, there's a roundabout there, a school, the Y, and the library,
Yep.
and there's a lot of kids that use that roundabout and that sidewalk. And if a distribution center went in there with trucks coming in and out all day, I think the city really needs to address getting them in and out without harming any kids.
Yeah, it all depend on what the site plan is and what the truck traffic would be and how many and how big and so forth and so on. That would be each proposal would have to be analyzed separately to understand what that's going to be.
Is there still a discussion going on about interchange at 180th or County Road 4 there?
Not presently, MDOT is not that favorable on it, so, I mean, it could still be the work, but if it is, it's probably a decade away.
Other questions for Dan? Dan, you kind of paused in the middle of discussion and asked for questions, asked for some questions. Did you have some other information you wanted us to hear this evening?
No, that was really kind of it. I wanted to leave this open for, kind of the exchange that I'm hearing now too, if there were specific things that came up, thoughts, questions, concerns, but, I know it's a long game, as you're all very well aware, but, I think there's some interesting conditions out there that we're hopefully going to be able to capitalize on here sooner than later.
Right. Any other questions for Dan? Right. Dan, thank you for joining us this evening. Always great to see you and hear the updates. And thanks for the hard work on this.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy this beautiful weather.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. No action requested from council on tonight's update. And so with that, unless there's anything further, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is our 2023 budget discussion. And Dan, are you starting us on this?
Yep. President, members of the EDA, included in your packet was a memo on the 2023 draft budget. If you recall, back in July, we met and kind of talked about drivers, anything that was additional that the EDA wanted to consider for 2023. Took those, the comments received at the July meeting and put together the draft budget below. I do want to reiterate that for 2023, we're not proposing any change to the EDA levy. We did a fairly sizable increase last year to 150. That's proposed to stay the same in the 23, so no additional increase for next year. For this budget, what I did was, what I ended up doing was rolling all the categories up into 4 categories: operations, wages, planning, contract services, and downtown incentive. And what I'll do is I'll just go through each one of those items briefly, and then at the end we'll open it up for questions and feedback on the budget. I will have up here in 1 second on your screen, you should see the breakdown for the 2023. Yep, there we go. So we have for operations and wages, we have 88,000. That contains the staff wages, which is the EDA portion of the community development director position, EDA member wages, operational supplies, engineering, and other legal expenses. Also in this category, we put some funds allocated towards banner replacements. If we can't find community sponsors for them, we do have some funds that'll be earmarked for use for banner replacements this year. And then also downtown beautification efforts. We've been funding some of the beautification efforts out of operations, that will be continued in 23 as well. On the planning category, to what Dan Peterson from CBRE was saying on the concept plating for the Headwaters 123, we have put some money into the planning portion for next year to allow for that ghost plating or concept plating to happen, as well as looking at a Highway 61 commercial land use study. When those projects do come forward, we will be asking Washington County CDA for grant match for pre-development grant opportunities. So we will work with CDA to leverage our dollars with their dollars to make them go further. We have $25,000 at this point allocated for those two planning studies for 23. Contract services, based on previous conversations, there's been discussion about increasing the contribution for BR&E services with the Chamber of Commerce. So I did increase that to $7,000. Current agreement that we have with the Chamber is for $5,000. So we did increase that based on previous discussions at the EDA level. And the final category is a downtown incentive. Like $30,000 is placed here, which is the same as the 2022 allocation. In 2022, we've had one approved to date. We do have one pre-approved that's pending completed work for the demolition, one of the buildings downtown. And then we have two additional applications that have inquired about the program but have not completed work or have not submitted to date. So for 2022, we are seeing an uptick in requests for the downtown or for the incentive program, which was anticipated. Anticipate that incentive or that those requests to continue on in 23. Also want to note that if we don't issue the full 30,000 in incentive, those extra funds will be then allocated to grow the EDA's fund balance. So if we do have a larger project that comes forward that needs incentive to land here, we will have some cash on hand that we can take care of those incentives. So that downtown incentive is designed to, if we don't fully allocate or expend those funds, we will use those balance to start to grow the EDA's fund balance for future projects. Do want to just draw a quick note on the budget for 23 is that with the downtown plan, it was approved by council on the 25th. We're still working on creating the next steps for that plan, including budget and prioritization for the projects. We are going to be bringing that back to the EDA. So I don't have any funds at this point allocated in 23 for downtown planning. Do you want to also say that in the current EDA 2022 budget, it does look like there's going to be some funds that could be allocated to take on some of those next level projects, those next level planning projects. I'm reaching out to consultants right now for some quotes on what those projects would be so we can come back with a better picture of what the next expenses would be for that project. So I don't have anything included in 23 plan, but we are working on trying to figure out next steps for the downtown plan as well. With that, staff, I'm just looking for feedback at this point on the draft 2023 budget. Is the EDA in agreement with it, or is there any areas that you all feel like need to be changed or adjusted moving forward?
And when you're referring to the downtown plan projects, are you specifically referring to some of the things we identified we wanted to do, like signage or whatever, or is it that continuing work with them on that southeast quadrant?
A combination of one of the topics that came out of that was, the signage as one project, but also it became pretty clear during the approval process that the boat launch, the possibility of moving that boat launch was a linchpin down there, that if it wasn't able to be moved, that sort of changed some of the prioritization for the remainder projects in there. So reached out to see what an additional study for that is to actually study that area in depth. But at this point, we're just looking at, there is going to be some excess funds in 2022's budget that we could possibly reallocate to take care of some of those initial planning studies or initial work on the downtown plan. So it's not being shelved, we're just looking at what can we do with funds that are currently available for that.
Other thoughts, questions? Now it's kind of a great time to provide feedback and priorities.
I know so last year on the hiring a new planner and that part of that budget, which never really happened, is that when you say we haven't changed it, but that 88,000 seems higher than what we had projected before. Is that a higher number or not than, or the same?
It's the same. So what I ended up doing for this year was, instead of separating out wages, I just rolled them all into operations. So that actually there's that category item contains all the operational stuff, which in last year's was a separate line item with staff wages below. those have just been rolled up into one category for this year. So there's no change for '23.
Other questions or priorities? Next step on budget process is this gets rolled into the overall city budget conversations. Those are starting here very soon. And then obviously we're looking to get a preliminary budget in front of council for preliminary approval by the end of September to set the preliminary levy. So you guys will remember from previous meetings that or previous years that we can always decrease the levy, but we can't increase. And so if there's something further that we wanted the EDA to have money allocated for, we kind of need to set that aside now because it does get funded out of the general fund.
Is there a projected number increase from last year on that at this point?
I have not seen, go ahead.
Sorry,
A projected number of an increase on
Levy
that
and-
levy, or full levy at this point?
not yet.
Okay.
Any other specific items? The increase to the, I'm happy to support the increase to the chamber. Does that mean us kind of changing the scope of services to be provided? And are there some additional things that have been contemplated, or is that kind of seen as kind of same scope as previously? We're just attaching a higher dollar to it. I'm fine with either approach, but.
I think at this point, it's a little bit to be determined in terms of that. I guess personally, if we're increasing the funding, I'd like to see possibly that scope expand slightly, but also have to be realizing that there's limited staff time that's available at chamber. Don't want to overload too much additional work. So I think if EDA is looking to increase that, I think a conversation, between the city and the chambers would go hand in hand with that contract approval. Since we are on a year-to-year BR&E service agreement, we are able to make those adjustments on an annual basis. So we could do that as part of that annual review and renewal process for the agreement.
And those would come up as part of that renewal, agreement renewal that's towards the end of the year, is that right?
Correct. We typically start that process in December, right around the time when the levy gets approved, so we know what the numbers are for next year. And then we get that usually approved the first meeting in January for that year.
That said, the placeholders, does that seem reasonable? The increase from 5 to 7, does that seem reasonable? Okay, good. All right, I don't have anything for, the tough one on this is so much of what we do is project-based, and until that project is known and identified and quantified, it's hard to know specifically, but I feel like this approach has served us well this year, and so taking this similar approach into next year as we get further into planning seems to be what has worked, and I'm comfortable with that approach, but always open to feedback if there's something more specific others would like to see. All right. With that, so then Dan, do you expect this coming back for another check-in for council approval?
Correct. This typically comes back in October, November after council sort of reviewed this in light of the whole general fund budget. And we bring back updates if there's any changes to it at that point for final review.
Very
Yes, so this isn't cut in stone necessarily.
Nope.
So I just want to make that clear.
And just not cut in stone, but we lose the ability to significantly increase it. Yeah, so. All right, with that, we can close out this budget or this agenda item and move on to the 2040 comprehensive plan implementation. And Abby, I think you're taking this one.
I am. Thank you, President Bain. I prepared a presentation on the comprehensive plan implementation. I recognize some members of the EDA are familiar with the comprehensive plan, some may not be. It is 12 slides. I'm gonna skip over kind of that background, but we have a 20-year guiding document that was adopted in 2020 by the City Council. It was a document that was developed with the community. I don't know all the particulars, but it is the document that guides the work of the Community Development Department, and that includes planning, zoning, land use, economic development, parks and trails, and even touches into some of our utilities, transportation, and water resources. I'm gonna skip ahead to, I'm gonna just skip ahead really quick. This slide in here is in here for a very specific reason. The League of Minnesota Cities says, hey, cities, you need to develop a comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan is the foundation for everything that communities should be doing therefore after. We're still kind of sitting at that bottom part of the pyramid where we have identified a comprehensive plan and we're starting to move in areas where we need to look at our zoning codes, our subdivision ordinances, even things like economic development policies and programs. Do they really meet the goals that we have for a community and where we want to be by 2040? So some of the economic competitiveness, there is a chapter in the comp plan called economic competitiveness. Some of the goals and objectives identified in there are to enhance the image of Forest Lake. Some of these things we're doing right now, cooperating with the chamber to stimulate and maintain commercial interest in the downtown. Some of them, however, are really kind of easy, almost checkoffs. It takes a little bit of time, but allowing home-based businesses, occupations. Our code allows for some, but maybe not in all districts. Just reviewing that is one of the things that we said we might look into in the next year. Delineating and improving the function and appearance of business districts. We do have design guidelines, but the comp plan does say, hey, take a look at those design guidelines in all of the business districts within the city, including in that would be a redevelopment plan for the Highway 61 corridor. I think Dan had just mentioned that one of the things that we'll be looking into in the coming months and maybe even the early part of 2023 is some inclusion and alteration of business mix maybe along that South Highway 61 corridor to really start seeing some more commercial activity generating through there, but also to serve undermet needs. We're fielding a lot of inquiries for businesses that need large acreage, and there is some untapped large acreage with very close proximity to urban services, the transportation network, sewer, water, and then develop marketing plan and strategy aimed at promoting a variety of business opportunities. I wanted to bring up to the EDA that even though we have this economic competitiveness chapter in our comp plan, there are a lot of other economic development related things in other chapters of the comp plan. The land use chapter, the housing chapter, parks and trails, transportation. I'm not going to read all these off, but a lot of these goals and policies that the city have really do a lot of overlap. So even though this commission or this authority, this body may not see all of the activities that are happening with other commissions, there are other activities that are occurring that I think still kind of fit or are relatively adjacent to the work and the things that this body promotes. One thing that I have a goal is to kind of keep that tie between the EDA and the Planning Commission and even Parks Commission. So you start to see how some of the work, some of the policies that these other organizations or other bodies are doing are helping you do your jobs, essentially. One of the things that I did also note is some of the current implementation efforts in the land use category, creating a staging plan to support infrastructure. That's currently identified in the comp plan. So the comp plan guides for 20 years. We've looked at how we can feasibly grow within the first 10 and then the next 20, that we're not kind of sprawling out as a community, that we're really being able to make sure that we're servicing the areas in a responsible way. We're working with properties that detract from our established image goals. That's through our code enforcement efforts. We're maintaining that balance between urban and rural nature of the community. And these are just things that we're doing in an ongoing review process at the Planning Commission level, the City Council level. And then we are requiring new development to be designed to preserve and be compatible with natural features. Housing, we are looking at improvements to streets, sidewalks, trails, parks, street lighting, and other projects, and that's really just to improve our neighborhoods. Housing is in some ways an economic function of economic development. Rooftops and the inclusion of more rooftops is something that helps drive our local economy. And park and trails, we develop park and trail facilities that provide opportunities for all ages and user groups. We are currently updating the park, trail, and open space plan. There's an active survey, public engagement survey going on right now. And the next month, we're going to be doing some very targeted focus groups with underrepresented communities, of distinct characteristics. We've learned, for example, that 25% of all households in Forest Lake have one person living with them with a disability. That's a very large segment of the population that we want to learn more about how it is they're actually using our park system, or there might be barriers to our park system. And then providing periodic evaluation of our existing land against the community needs for parks and trails. I think this might have been my last page, but future EDA implementation efforts in that economic competitiveness world, continue to work with the chamber, delineate and improve functions. We're looking at kind of those redevelopment plans along the Highway 61 corridor for mixed use or other types of business and commercial use along through there. Encourage planned mixed use residential commercial developments in the downtown area. We're very much actively working with property owners on potential redevelopment in the downtown, and then provide adequate amount of land planned and zoned for commercial industrial uses. So these are things that periodically I'll be bringing back before you. It may not be that you have a whole big heavy hand in reviewing a lot of stuff, but certainly helping provide guidance or recommendation to the city council where appropriate is something that I want to start tying into this commission or authority. Very quick, I didn't want to take up too much time because I know we're getting close to the end of our meeting today.
Thank you,
Any
Abby.
questions?
Questions, go ahead.
I just, so we had a joint meeting before you, between the Planning Commission, City Council, and us about lot sizes. Just an update on where that's at and what the Planning Commission is kind of going towards.
Sure. It's still an ongoing conversation. When I came on in May, the Planning Commission was kind of at a standstill. Two separate recommendations, one from former planner, zoning administrator Donovan Hart, and another from Nathan First with Bolton and Mink, on a smaller lot size with a narrower lot width to help accommodate for the demand that there is in the residential housing market. There's been some reluctancy from, it's hard for me to say a majority, but a large number of members of the Planning Commission. They are concerned that that doesn't necessarily represent the development style of Forest Lake. Wednesday night, I'm going to have a very similar conversation with the Planning Commission regarding this. It is my goal to have an ordinance for them for their consideration that does move towards what the comp plan is asking for, and that we did say we would zone for more low to medium density residential development, which is guided for a smaller lot size, closer to the city's core. Certainly 180th, 190th, we're not looking at putting in 6,000, 7,000 square foot lots, but closer to the utilities, the infrastructure. That is something that we as a community said that we would do. And so I hope to kind of move that forward in the next couple months.
Yeah, so to your point about rooftops and economic development, I think maybe a position that the EDA states to go to the Planning Commission or City Council on this might be something that would be important, because from my understanding, we went through that, we are on the higher end of the lot size, so it's not like we're making a seismic move that it's going to change a lot. But I just think that to allow developers to try to benefit off of that and make some more money and make it feasible to do these projects, it's important.
It's a
still
great
keep the I understand the Planning Commission's concern, but there's got to be a happy medium there. So I would suggest maybe that the EDA have a position on that to go forward to either the Planning Commission or the City Council.
Could we take a similar approach, similar to what we did on the downtown plan, where we did provide related commissions an opportunity to review in advance and then provide a motion to recommend or deny or just provide feedback? I think that would be, certainly we started with a joint workshop with everybody, and providing that input as that's starting to come to conclusion, I think would be good. Great suggestion. And assuming you're able to accommodate from a process.
Yep, we certainly can accommodate. I think that that's really important, because as much as we kind of work in here's our Parks Commission and our Planning Commission, it is a lot of interrelated work. And I think each of the bodies seeing how the others are supporting them in their work is really important. To your point, Commissioner Roberts, is it Commissioner? Is it, okay, one of the things that I'm learning and just kind of reviewing the data, Forest Lake is getting passed up right now and has been for the last couple of years to residential developers in Lino Lakes, Hugo, Centerville. And really, the developments that are being developed in those communities are supporting a smaller lot size, and not merely because of the economics. The demand is there as well. It turns out there are a whole host of people out there that don't want to mow a lawn, and they would like a smaller lot. And so that's just one of the factors right now that we're looking into. So
The other part of that too that I think is important is that we have commitments in the comp plan are related to housing and density. And if we aren't covering that with single family homes, then we are, that leans more heavily on multifamily. And we've heard some community feedback on that perhaps we're getting a little heavy on multifamily housing. And so trying to strike the right balance, that does push for us to allow those smaller lot sizes and those single family homes. So I think continuing to have that mix is important. And so whatever we need to, and I know there's a lot of detail in translating that into an actual ordinance, but I think it is important. Jenny,
Out
go
of
ahead.
curiosity, what is the width of that smaller lot size?
the lot size that was proposed by former zoning administrator Hart was 65 feet wide. I don't remember the square footage specifically. I don't believe it went down to 6,500, but I could take a look and bring that back before you. Yeah, I want to say it might have been 8,000 square foot minimum with a 65-foot wide.
8,000 square feet.
So, and even at that size, we're still kind of, there are builders out there that still think that might still be a little large, but I think that that's just a matter of looking at that the district specifically is the MXR1 and how we might be able to build in a range of housing, kind of an, if this housing product, maybe it's this house, lot size, if it's this type of product. But those are things that we definitely can bring back as we keep moving forward for you to comment on.
I know there's a couple of members on the planning commission that are adamantly against that. So there has to be a reasonable conversation on how we're going to do this, I think they're concerned about changing the whole Forest Lake image or whatever you want to call it. So something to talk about and something to think about. So,
Are you also thinking about then the fencing ordinance on a?
How does fencing fit into, or is kind of more?
Fencing is a
State
separate
specific.
ordinance, a separate set of regulations in the zoning code. And at this point, I hadn't been reviewing our fence regulations for alterations. I do know that there's been concern with the fencing regulation with the type of material and some issues with gating heights. But is there something specifically you'd like us to look into?
I'm a realtor and I get complaints from when you get into the more densely packed houses, what the rules are, the setbacks for fences, the height of fences. When they're that close, they want their privacy. So I just want to know that you're addressing that also. If you're going to change the lot width, are you going to do something, take another look at the fencing rules? So
Sure, I'll make a note of that.
privacy that they want.
Yep, sure. Thanks so much. That's great. It was more of an FYI, an update. I appreciate the feedback, and we'll come back before you when I've got a little bit more, when we're moving in a different direction.
Excellent. Thank you, Abby. Any final questions for Abby? All right. We are at other city updates. Patrick or Dan, anything further? Abby, anything further for?
Just want to draw the EDA's attention to the downtown sculpture that was placed in the roundabout was moved. So it's now out in front of City Hall. So if anybody hasn't come in through the front door, it's out in that roundabout as you come in, so you can see it as you walk in. So that move has been completed.
Good.
The only update that I have tonight on City Council's agenda, I guess last week at the Planning Commission did approve a site plan approval for Norhart, a new industrial complex. It's a 2-building complex that they will be utilizing for their manufacturing site of their multifamily residential structures on Highway 97. The city council tonight will consider a minor subdivision associated with it, but that'll be about 200,000 square feet of industrial space that's coming in to the community. I don't believe that they'll be constructing though until 2023.
Whereabouts on 97?
It's just to
McCullough
the
property,
west, yeah, the McCullough property, just to the west of the interstate properties.
It would border the airport there too. Okay.
Very good.
I just have one other question. I've asked the question a couple times, and it goes to the food truck and that, in policies. It seems like we lax those over COVID. There is a trailer that's what really seemingly looks like it's on the city portion of that property there, because it's on the west end. I don't know if that's the whole property or not, but just an update on where that's at with allowing that. We did lax it. Is that no longer with COVID, or that's been there now probably for over a year
I
continuously?
believe we don't have very specific rules on food trucks. I believe they have to move every 30 days or not be located there. They have to have the owner's permission to be on the property. I've never seen it on the city's property there. If it's all the way to the west, then that would be the city's property, but we can take a look at that. So
I thought we had put a limit on that years ago, like 90 days or something like that.
I think it's only that it has to be moved every 30 days or something.
That doesn't
We'll,
feel
we'll,
right.
we'll take a look at that again.
It still hurts the brick and mortar people. And that was a whole part of that conversation that we had 3 or 4 years ago. And so, and I know there was some conversation with the Legion because of that too, when 4th of July came, so we need to find out what's going on there.
Sure.
That particular operator had, at one time, was moving around the city to kind of do an end around or a back story to having only 30 days, or even it was 2 weeks, but it continually moved for that purpose. But this it's been a year
Yeah, pretty
plus.
permanent,
It's been in one spot, so I don't.
All right. We'll move on to Washington County update and Chris. Any questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. Nanette, it's good to see you.
Well, hello, President Bain and council members. I have a couple of things I thought I'd share. We have been consistently welcoming new members to the chamber, so that's great. We've also just had our record high in all numbers golf event just 2 weeks ago, and thank you for giving me the out to miss. Jan. So that was nice. We do have it's this way every year, right on the tails of golf, then we have our Business Education Day, and that's where we welcome about 100 new teachers. Again, they're still hiring, so we're waiting on a final count, but they're teachers from the Forest Lake School District as well as LILA, Lakes International Language Academy. So our businesses sponsor that event, and we then welcome it with a vendor show and luncheon. So that's in the works. And then over the course of the last few months, we've been reworking all of the chamber programs so that when the fall comes, we're up to snuff and have a new, fresh look on all the programs that we currently offer. So I'll gladly answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Nanette this evening? Very good. Any other items to come before us? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.